And Another Thing. Just Saying. Essays by E. Raymond Tatton. Gone Fishing.
I never told my father much. Maybe that's why I wasn't sure if I would even bring it up. But Dad stopped stirring his coffee while he listened, and never did reach for his cigarette, as it burned to a stub in the ashtray. So I let a little out, and then a little more, like my fishing line, until I'd finished the whole story. When we headed out along the farm road in Bolton, I always noticed the brook that snaked out of the woods, disappearing under the bridge into a dark pool. It was probably the same stream that ran from Charlie Zink's pasture, and the same that fell steeply under Xander's wooden cider mill, where Dad took us to buy glass-gallon jugs of cider every Thanksgiving. "That's a fire hole," Dad said. When the horn on top of the town hall blasts, that tells where the fire is. Volunteers bring the ladder truck and the big, slow tanker loaded with water. When the fire's out, they come by a hole like that to fill the truck. They dug 'em with shovels years ago. They go way down deep, too. Sunday morning I had walked a mile-long gravel road to Sugar Road, then on another mile past the house and cow pastures of Charlie Zink's homestead. I carried my fishing rod with a can of worms and a new fishing fly I'd ordered from the Sears Roebuck catalog. I'd helped myself to my brother's hip boots, and although they were clumsy and hot, they allowed me to get to the places I hoped the big fish were waiting. But mostly it was the feeling of the water I liked as it rushed past the back of my legs while I stood in the middle of the brook, part of the stream, right in the middle of everything. I speared the first worm as it wiggled in my fingers, plopped it into the water, and let out the line. It wasn't long before I got a quick tug, but when I checked, there was nothing but a clean hook. It was more of the same until the worms were gone, and it was time for my new green and red fly. I cast the bait to a perfect spot, but a branch caught the line. As I reached to jiggle it loose, my feet slipped, and I slid with the loose gravel down into the fire hole. I'd been careless, leaving the boots strapped to my hips, and now I felt the weight as they filled with water. Although my neck and shoulders were under water, I reached above my head and barely grabbed a clump of the grassy overhang. I leaned to my side and threw one leg and barely caught the heel of the boot just out of the water, resting it on a tiny gravel shelf. When the boot had drained, I managed to slip it off, and then ease back in the water just enough to raise the other boot and let that empty too. Then I climbed out and slogged home with the dripping hip boots slung over my shoulders and thoughts of drowning. As we sat at the kitchen table, my story, the reaching, the slip, and all the rest escaped in unplanned words. My father's face remained frozen, and he didn't interrupt, but just stared while his coffee grew colder and the smoke from his untouched cigarette coiled from the ashtray. When it was done, I walked outside, wishing I hadn't told, with a heavy feeling pressing me the same way evening mist sometimes settled low and thick over the barnyard. I'd revealed a secret about myself and felt empty, wondering how stupid I must have seemed. But I wasn't bothered by the dying part. It was that no one would have known. With no body to cry over at a wake, the relatives would have been cheated, and people would talk about the boy who had disappeared long ago. I would have just been gone, a skeleton in hip boots, standing at the bottom of the Bolton fire hole, the bones of my arms waving with the current. And only the fish would have known.